We are ready to start our second module, second of 4. This module only has 4 sections in it, so you will notice the packets are quite a bit longer, which means instead of 6 sections like we had in the last, we'll only have 4, but maybe 3 videos with each one since they are a little bit longer. So this is when we introduce fractions, and then we continue with them into module 3. So you'll notice a lot of overlap between module 2 and module 3. Same questions on the test, things like that, because they both deal with fractions. Module 3 just takes it a little bit further with its additive and multiplicative reasoning. So first we need to understand a fraction. That's why we call this section number sense, because a lot of students see the fraction 1/6 and it doesn't even mean anything to them. So when we see a fraction, the number in the denominator means how many units, how many intervals there will be between 0 and 1. So there are going to be 6 intervals. So then I cut it in half, and then I do 3 intervals on the left, 1, 2, 3, and then 3 intervals on the right. And then this is 1/6, 2/6, 3/6, 4/6, 5/6, and of course 1 is 6/6. Everybody knows that, right? Anything over itself is 1. 6 over 6 is 1. 3 over 3 is 1. -5 over -5 is 1. 10 over 10 is 1. So any number over itself, any letter over itself is 1. Anything divided by itself is 1. And then we mark the 1/6 because locate means plot a point, and there is 1/6 on our graph. So when I see this next one, I know to make 4 intervals. So I cut it in half to make 2 intervals, and then I cut each of those intervals in half. That's the easiest way to make it even, is to start with the half. So this would be 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, and you'll always know if you've done it correctly because the number over itself should be under 1, and 4/4 is 1. And then this says plot a point at 1/4. Okay, 1/8 tells me there are 8 intervals between 0 and 1. So I cut it in half, and then I cut each of those halves in half, which makes 4, and then I cut each of the fourths in half. That will make 8. So when the number's even, it's nice and easy way to do it is just start doing cut it in half, cut it in fourths, cut it in eighths. And so this first one is 1/8, 2/8, and what this means is 1 copy of 1/8. This means 2 copies of 1/8. 1/8 plus 1/8 is 2/8. This means 3 copies of 1/8. 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8 is 3/8. 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, and 8/8. And we always know we've done it correctly, like I said, because the number divided by itself should always be under 1, so you'll know exactly if you've made the correct number of intervals. And then 1/8 is that first spot. Okay, let's not do D, but I'll have you guys do C and E. D's like just a copy of what we just did, and it's a lot of numbers to write, so we're going to skip D. So go ahead and do C and E on your own. Shut off the video, and then come back and we'll check those two together. Okay, 1/3 means I need to divide into 3 intervals. And the first one will be 1/3, and we always start from 0. 2/3, 3/3, I can tell I've done it correctly, and then I place my locator point at 1/3. And last but not least, 1/5. Let's see, somehow we're going to have to divide this into 5 equal intervals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's about as equal as I can get from eyeballing it. So 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, 4/5, and 5/5. And I place a point at 1/5. And that's one copy of 1/5. So I hope you guys did okay with that. Now we're going to switch it up a little bit, and the number in the numerator is now going to be negative, or you could say the fraction is negative. We do the same thing, we just count backwards. Instead of counting to the right of 0 for the negatives, we count to the left. And I see this is a little bit blurry. Let me fix that up a little bit. Oh, wrong button. There we go. There we go. So -1/6, we would make 6 intervals still. That part doesn't change ever. And so -1/6, -2/6, -3/6, -4/6, -5/6, -6/6, which is -1. And then I place my location point at -1/6. So same thing, just counting on the other side of 0. So how about we do C and E this time, and I'll let you do A and B. So I'm still not going to do this one. It's just too many to write down. So for C, we have -1/3. So that means we need 3 intervals to the left of 0. And so we start counting at 0 always. So -1/3, -2/3, and -3/3. And take note that intervals are not the same thing as tick marks. So between 0 and -1, you should have 3 intervals, which equates to 2 tick marks. Because some people get the two confused. Intervals means gaps between the tick marks. So there's one interval, another interval, and another interval to make 3 intervals. And then I place my point at -1/3. And -1/5, I need 5 intervals to the left of -1. So -1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 intervals, just what I needed. I'm going to start shortening it here. I'm tired of writing that 100 times. And so we start with 0 and write -1/5, -2/5, -3/5, -4/5, and of course 1 is -5/5, because anything divided by itself is 1. A negative divided by a positive is negative. And then I put a dot at -1/5. Okay, let's go back up to A and B. So shut off your video, find those two numbers on the number line, plot them, and then turn the video back on and we'll compare answers. So -1/4, cut it in half again. 1, 2, 3, 4 intervals. So -1/4, -2/4, -3/4, and I always know I've done it correctly if -1 is under -1, which it is, and then I place a dot at -1/4. And I forgot to write 4 intervals, just to remind you. And then on the next one, I have 8 intervals, so we're going to have to cut it in half 3 times. So first I cut it in half, then I cut each half in half, and that makes 4 intervals. Then I cut each of the 4 in half, and that will make my 8 intervals. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So -1/8, -2/8, -3/8, -4/8, -5/8, -6/8. See why I don't do the 10-1? This one takes forever. and -7/8, and last but not least, underneath -1, -8/8, and then I place my location point at -1/8. So same thing we did on the last page, just this time with negative numbers, so we're plotting to the left of 0 instead of to the right. Okay, next we're going to do fractions with rectangles. So we'd like to give you a lot of conceptual, like pictures, so that you can feel the fractions, you can understand them. You just don't see 1/6 and not know what it means. So this means color in 1 out of 6 rectangles. So we first divide it into 6, so 6 is still our number of intervals. And then I color in 1 of the 6 intervals. So 6 intervals, color in 1. So this one might be, I can't do it because I'm writing double paged, but if you want to, filling it in with highlighters makes it a little bit faster. I'll just do it with little slash marks. Okay, 1/3. This means I need 3 intervals. So I divide the rectangle into 3 as close as equal pieces as I can. Ooh, not too close. And I'm shading in, this is how many are shaded, 1 out of 3. So that's what 1/3 means, 1 out of 3, or 1 divided by 3. So that would look like this. 1/5, same thing. It says to shade 1, and I need 5 intervals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Not exactly equal, and shade 1 of those. So this is always the number shaded, the numerator. And the denominator is always the number of intervals. Okay, 1/4. We have cut it in half, cut each half in half, and we shade 1 out of 4. And this one, since we don't have to label all of them, this one will be okay to do. Actually, why don't you guys do the last 2? There we are. So you have 1/10 and 1/8. So for 1/10, you can cut it in half and then cut each of those halves into 5 equal pieces. For 1/8, you can just keep cutting it in half. So go ahead and turn off the recording and then come back and we'll share our answers. Okay, so 1/10, the number shaded will be 1, and the number of intervals will be 10. So like I said, it's easiest to cut it in half and then do 5 on the left and 5 on the right. And then shade 1 of those 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1/8, a little bit easier because we don't have to, we can just keep cutting it in half. Cut it in half, cut it each half in half, and cut each fourth in half. So now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and this says shade in 1 of those 8s. So the numerator is the number shaded, the denominator is the number of intervals. Fun stuff, right? Okay, so next we're going to use triangles. I think on your test it's circles. Doesn't matter which figure it is. And we're going to learn how to see a group and know how to figure out what 1/6 is. So sometimes you'll be able to tell. Like 1/3, I can easily tell because there's 3 rows. So 1/3 has to be 1 of those 3 rows. 1, 2, 3, 4 triangles is 1/3. But sometimes, like on this first one, it's not so easy to tell because there's not 6 columns, there aren't 6 rows. So what you can do is divide. 3, 6, 9, 12. Take 12 divided by 6, and it will tell you that you need 2 triangles. And then you can go through and check that you actually do have 6 groups. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 groups. So if you take one of those 6, that's 2 triangles. So that's how you can tell. I know there's going to be 6 groups or 6 intervals or whatever you want to call it in this part, but I don't know how many's in each group. So if I take the 12 divided by 6, that means circle groups of 2, and you should come up with 6 equal groups, which I did. So I only want one of those groups, so that's why I bring 2 triangles over. One-fourth, another easy one. So there's 4 rows. I can't do, 4 columns. I can't do rows because there's only 3, but I can do columns. So this is 1/4, this is 1/4, this is 1/4, and this is 1/4. So each of those represents 1/4. And when you do 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4, you get 4/4, which is a whole. So they want 1/4 of the triangles, so that would be 3 triangles. So they only want one of the fourths. If that was 3/4, then you'd circle all 3 of those, and you'd bring over 3 rows of 3. That's how it changes with the numerator. So 1/4 just means circle 1 out of 4 rows, or columns. I keep calling it rows. But if it was 3/4, that means circle 3 out of 4 of the columns. Okay, I'll let you guys try the next one. So go ahead and do 1/8. And if you can't figure out how many are in each, count them and divide like we did up here. And then turn the video back on when you're done and we can check your work. Okay, we have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And I want to break it into 8 groups, so that means there'll be 2 per groups if I want 8 different intervals. So there's 1 group, 2 groups, 3 groups, 4 groups, 5 groups, 6 groups, 7 groups, 8 groups. So I need, out of the 8 groups, I only want 1 of the 8 groups. So I bring one of the groups over, and it is 2 triangles. So that's considered 1/8 of the entire picture. So there were 8 groups, and I just bring over 1. Now if it had been 3/8, then I would have brought over 3, 2, 2, and 2. But because the numerator's 1, that means I only want 1 of the groups over here, which equals 2 triangles. Okay. How about I do the first one, you do the second one on this one. I get the easy one. Nanny, nanny, boo, boo. So there are 5 columns. So finding 1/5, very easy, because there are 5 columns. Remember, I can't circle the rows. There's only 3 rows. That would not be 1/5. But because there are 5 columns, I can circle one of the 5 columns, and my answer is going to be the 3 triangles. Okay, so you have another one to practice on, so turn the video back on when you are done. and we'll check your work. So for this one, we have 3, 6, 9, 12, 13, 14. So 14 divided by 7 groups means you'll have 2 per group. So 2, there's 1 group, and remember we need 7. There's 2 groups, there's 3 groups, 4 groups, 5 groups, 6 groups, and 7 groups. And I want 1 of those 7 groups, so 1 of the groups is just 2 triangles. So just like the last one you did. Okay, now we're going to go on to fractions that don't have 1 in the numerator. And so now it's very, very important that you use the copies language. So this one, for instance, would be 3 copies of 1/2. So that means I want to still break my interval between 0 and 1 into 2 intervals. So I go between 0 and 1 and I do 2 intervals. And then this is 1/2, this is 2/2, but I have to do another interval because notice this number is larger than 1. Anytime the numerator is bigger than the denominator, that means it's larger than 1. We call that an improper fraction because 2 over 2 is 1. So if the numerator is bigger than 2, it's larger than 1. So then I have to do 2 intervals in between 1 and 2 as well. And then 1 copy of 1/2, 2 copies of 1/2, 3 copies of 1/2 would lie right there. So this one, I have to break it into 3 intervals. So 1, 2, 3. And then I start naming my intervals like we did on the last pages. 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. And the number I need is listed, so I don't have to go on to the next interval. So then I can put a dot at 2/3 to mark its location. Okay, so 5/4. This means I need 4 intervals. And this is 5 copies of 1/4. So first I break it into 4 intervals, cut it in half, and I have 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, and of course 1 is 4/4, but I haven't went far enough yet because 5/4, the numerator is larger than the denominator. That means it's larger than 1. So now I have to do the next interval, same thing, break it into 4 intervals, 4/4, 5/4, 6/4, 7/4, 8/4, and I'll know if I've done it correctly. Is 8 divided by 4 2? Yes, it is. And then mark 5/4 on your number line. So I can see 5/4 is equal to 1 and 1/4. And we'll learn how to do that in this chapter, make it into a mixed number, but you can tell by the number line it's equal to 1 and 1/4. Just like 3/2 is equal to 1 and 1/2. Okay, let's do one more and then you guys can try the next 2. So 3/5. 3 copies of 1/5. So that means between 0 and 1 I need 5 intervals. 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, 4/5. So 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, 4/5, and 5/5, which is 1. And I need to place a point at 3/5, and there we have it. Okay, so that kind of gives you an idea how big 3/5 is. It's over 1/2, but it's closer to a half than it is to 0 or 1. So 1.5 would be right in the center. So it kind of gives you an idea of the value of 3/5 instead of just some random fraction 3/5. Now you know its value. It's 3 copies of 1/5. Okay, go ahead and turn off your video, do D and E, and then check back, and we will check them. Okay, 7/8 means there's going to be 8 intervals. So cut it in half again to make fourths, cut each of the fourths in half to make eighths. So this would be 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, and we can tell we've done it correctly because 1 is under 1, because 8/8 is 1, and this says place a dot at 7 copies of 1/8. Here's 1 copy of 1/8, 2 copies, 3 copies, 4, 5, 6, 7 copies of 1/8. And next we have 5/3. So this tells me to make 3 intervals. So 1, 2, 3. So this is 1/3. This is 2/3, this is 3/3, and I can see I haven't gone far enough because 3/3 is 1 and 5/3 is larger than 1. That means I need to do the same thing with the next interval. Cut it into 3 equal parts, and this would be 4/3, 5/3, and you'll know if you've done it correctly right here. Is 6 divided by 3 2? Yes. And so now I place a point at 5/3. Not so bad, right? And you'll learn that 5/3 later on in this chapter is equal to 1 and 2 copies of 1/3, which would be 1 and 2/3 when we make it into a mixed number. So you can read the mixed number once you get it on the number line. Okay, let's see if we can do one more page, because this is the last of student page C here. Now we're going to do the same thing, but on the negatives. And this, by the way, is supposed to be a negative. So -2/3, -7/4, -3/5, and it looks like, I don't know, like somebody put liquid paper there, and I know I didn't. -3/5, -7/8, -5/3. So these will all be to the left of 0. So this says 2 intervals. I can see the number is larger than -1, so I have to do 2 intervals. So 2 intervals here, 2 intervals here, -1/2, -2 halves, -3 halves, -4 halves. And I know I've done it correctly because this equals -1 and this equals -2. And then plot your point at -3 halves. So -2/3 is smaller than well, actually it's larger than -1, but it's going to be in between 0 and -1 because the numerator is not larger. So this tells me to make 3 intervals. 1, 2, 3, -1/3, -2/3, -3/3, and it's at -2/3. -7/4. So we need intervals, 4 intervals in between each whole number and its opposite. So in between 0 and -1, 4 intervals, and I can see this one's going to be to the left of -1 because -1 is -4 fourths, and -7 fourths is going to be over here. So I also need to label this interval. So starting with 0, -1 fourth, -2 fourths, -3 fourths, of course -1 is -4 fourths, then -5 fourths, -6 fourths, -7 fourths, and then -8 fourths, which I know is correct because -8 divided by 4 is -2. And then place a dot at -7 fourths. Okay, let's do one more and then you can do the next two. So -3 fifths means 5 intervals. So in between 0 and -1, I need 5 intervals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have -1 fifth, -2 fifths, -3 fifths, -4 fifths, and -5 fifths, which is equal to -1. So I know I've done my numbering correctly, and we place our dot at -3 fifths. Okay, go ahead and do D and E and then check back. We'll check our answers and then we'll end this video to start on lesson D on the next page. Okay, this tells me 8 intervals and the negative tells me to go to the left of -1. So this is going to be tough getting 8 in here. So cut it in half, cut each half in half, and then cut each fourth in half. So I think I'm going to alternate -1/8, -2/8, -3/8, -4/8, -5/8, -6/8, -7/8, and -8/8. And this wants, which is -1, and this wants me at -7/8, which will be right there. Gotta write pretty small to fit all that in. And 3/3 would be -1 or -3/3. So I know this one's going to take 2 intervals because this number is larger than 3. So to the left of 0, 2 intervals, and we need to divide those intervals into 3 intervals each. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and just go down the line and start counting by thirds. So this is -1/3, -2/3, -3/3, which is -1 as it should be, -4/3, -5/3, and -6/3. -6 divided by 3 is -2, so we're in the right place. And now put a location point at -5/3. Done! So I'll see you in the next video for the second part of this packet.